Hello, everyone, and welcome again to my second Facebook Live. Thank you for being here if you're here. This week I thought I'd talk about what actually is disordered eating, since I mentioned it a lot in my Facebook Live last week, and I realised that maybe not everyone actually understands what that might mean. So I was explaining last week how in any given yoga class, up to 60% or so of the participants might actually be engaging in disordered eating habits or behaviours, which is obviously a lot. And by the way, the incidence of that disordered eating is also really high in gyms and in fitness classes, in strength training, pretty much anywhere there are women. And I've seen examples of this over my 15 years, 20 years maybe in the yoga world. I've seen lots of examples of eating and body image issues on repeat, so over and over again, and at a pretty high incidence rate in the yoga communities. It seems to only be increasing, I think. So I really believe that this is something those of us in the yoga and wellness worlds really need to be on the lookout for, especially because disordered eating habits are the greatest predictor of developing an eating disorder. And eating disorders are the deadliest of all mental illnesses. Yoga teachers and personal trainers and fitness and strength coaches, I really think we all need to know about this, because we're in a really unique position actually to help make someone's issues with food and with their bodies much, much worse, potentially. And we're in a position to recognize these behaviors if we know what to look for, and get our clients and our students the help that they need. And for yoga people, yoga teachers, we could even use the power of yoga and meditation to actually heal our own and our students' eating and body image issues. Wouldn't that be cool? So with all this talk of disordered eating, as I said, realised hadn't explained what the hell that actually means. So what is disordered eating actually? Think of it this way. There's kind of this spectrum of eating behaviours. And on one end, we've got normal eating, all the way through to the other end where we've got clinical eating disorders. So anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. And in between these two is this grey area where eating isn't exactly normal, it's not exactly intuitive, but it doesn't qualify as a clinical eating disorder, a diagnosable condition. Many health professionals, so myself included, use this term disordered eating to include everyone along that disordered eating spectrum. So that includes the people with eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia nervosa, as well as those who don't yet have a diagnosis or never will have a diagnosis, but who still struggle with harmful thoughts and behaviours related to food. So disordered eating includes this pretty big grey area. Obviously, it's a far more expansive range of people included in that area than just the term eating disorders alone. So hopefully that explains what I mean by disordered eating. There are heaps, there's so many people who don't meet that diagnostic criteria for eating disorders, but who still struggle massively with agonizing thoughts, disordered thoughts and behaviors around food. Behaviors that can have a really negative impact on their health, their quality of life, and often the lives of those people around them who are trying to care for them and understand them. So the next question that may arise is, how do I know if I might have disordered eating? So here are some red flags, mainly some thoughts and behaviours that I put together that might indicate disordered eating. May not necessarily mean you definitely are in this basket, but maybe if some of these sound familiar, they'll get you thinking and looking into this a bit more. So the first one's obsessing about body weight. Frequent weighing, so every morning, for example. I've heard fitness professionals, I've heard owners of gyms proudly proclaiming to their staff and their clients that they weigh themselves every morning. This is not normal. This is disordered. Also measuring, body checking in mirrors, pinching body parts, asking others if you look fat, trying to control body weight, and of course that includes all the food and eating related behaviours to control weight. So for example, always wondering about or researching the latest diet fad, for example, spending hours Googling keto recipes or something like that. Another red flag might be counting things, so counting calories, counting macros, but don't be fooled into thinking that just because you don't count things that you're off scot-free, that you don't have disordered eating, because a really common form of disordered eating is chronic restrained eating. So that's where you might not be counting calories or carb grams, and you therefore don't think you're dieting, but you're always aiming to eat as little as possible. So you maybe just eat the smallest possible portion that you can get away with, or you're putting off eating as long as possible. You're really stretching meals out. You might not be, I don't know, some people might not have breakfast at all, or they might push meals, far past the point of when they're actually hungry. And they might be doing that consciously or unconsciously. That one's a really common one. Other red flags, skipping meals, also known as intermittent fasting, which is all the rage these days. I've written a blog on that, and I can link to that blog in the caption for this. Fasting, obviously, so common in yoga. So we've got the juice cleanses, celery juice cleanse, which I hate. But yeah, that one. Detoxes of all kinds, water fasting, so even more extreme, we're not getting any calories at all. I've written a blog all about detox, what it actually involves in our bodies, what helps it and what hinders it, and surprisingly but not surprisingly, these kinds of cleanses and fasts actually inhibit your natural body's detoxification mechanisms. So, sucks. What else? Cutting out whole food groups without medical recommendation or supervision. So maybe cutting out carbs after you've self-diagnosed a condition like candida overgrowth, for example. That's a really popular one in the yoga world. Or being told that you have a food intolerance because an IgG antibody test told you so. These tests are not accurate. I've got a whole email series explaining why and how to, get to the bottom of that situation if that sounds like you. Other red flags, binging, which a lot of people will think they do because they don't have self-control or because they are addicted to food or they're, out of control emotional eaters, but usually binging happens as a result of dieting or restrictive eating. And then we get into this cycle of overeating and then restricting or dieting, which is known as the diet cycle. But again, that overeating, that gorging, that binging is almost always a natural result of restriction. What else? We've got clean eating, the whole phenomenon of stressing about what foods are good or bad, what foods are clean or dirty or toxic. And clean eating, whilst in and of itself is not, disordered, it's when we take it and adopt it in such a way that becomes disordered eating. So we become obsessive about it or really stressed and anxious about what happens if we eat the wrong foods, and you spend more time thinking and planning your meals than actually just eating. A couple of other red flags, we've got compensatory behaviours, like eating very little all day leading up to a social dinner in order to save the calories for it, or exercising to burn off food or as punishment for eating. We've got bulimic behaviours, which are kind of along the same lines, so purging through, vomiting, laxatives, enemas, colonics, exercise, and you don't necessarily have an eating disorder if you do that stuff. You have to meet certain criteria, and plenty of people purge in all kinds of ways without meeting those ED criteria, sadly. Spending money on and using supplements marketed as fat burners or weight loss supplements, so including natural ones. Garcinia cambogia is a really big one. I had a colourful conversation with someone on my Facebook page about that. This person seemed to be a distributor for that supplement and was saying that it was approved by the TGA and therefore it must work. Not true. It doesn't. Couple last red flags are things like avoiding eating out with friends or going to social gatherings where there's going to be food for fear of being made to eat foods that you deem too unhealthy. That can be a big red flag. Having weird tactics to covertly eat less when you are forced to be in a social eating situation, and just generally fear, anxiety, feeling out of control around food. These are some red flags of disordered eating. And as you can see, many of these are so common that we've come to think of them as normal. You know, you might think, isn't it normal to feel guilty if we don't eat 100% clean? Or isn't trying to burn off any transgressions at the gym or in a hot yoga class the right thing to do? Isn't that, we've been told that's what we should do, right? Or maybe you don't say yes to going out to ice cream with friends after they've asked you for the third or fourth time, but that's only because you're trying to get healthy and you don't want to mess your macros up. Surely that's okay, or surely it's okay to do a 3-day juice cleanse to reboot, and a bit of weight loss wouldn't hurt. You know, these things might kind of on the surface sound benign, but none of this stuff is actually normal. In fact, these can all be red flags for disordered eating. So that's some of the thoughts and behaviours that you might see associated with disordered eating. There's quite a lot, actually. There's quite a few physiological signs and symptoms that might be further indicators that you're getting into disordered eating territory. So for women, irregular periods, it's a big one, or even missing periods, amenorrhea, which is missing periods, or other fertility problems, problems conceiving. So maybe you've been trying to have a baby for 6 months, a year, 2 years, you know, after a year, we start to need to look into other possible reasons for that low fertility. In men, it can be similar. You can have a low sperm count, you can have loss of libido when you're not eating adequately and regularly enough. Other physiological signs, we can have a digestive disturbances. So when you're not eating regularly or adequately, you can get constipation, everything slows down. You can get tummy aches. You can even develop IBS type symptoms or develop food intolerances because your body downregulates the enzymes it needs to digest certain foods. And then, of course, it becomes very murky waters because those food intolerances then might be a reason to further restrict. But I've done a whole email series on that, as I mentioned, that I'll link to in the caption. A few other physiological signs are things like fatigue, poor sleep, mood issues, low libido, loss of muscle mass if you're trying to gain or maintain muscle, hair falling out or becoming really brittle and easy to break, poor immunity, poor sports performance if you compete in any kind of sports, or injuries because of that lack of adequate fuel coming in, or maybe even having to opt out of meets and competitions because of poor performance. So as you might be realizing, there's a lot of signs of disordered eating, and they are often used as reasons to go harder or stricter with a food restriction or a diet, rather than being treated as the warning signs that they are, that the disordered eating has gone too far. So obviously this is a really big topic. I'm clearly very passionate about it, having been through orthorexia and recovered from disordered eating myself. It's such a big topic. I can't really cover it in one Facebook Live video, or probably even 10 videos, which is why in 3 months' time, I'm going to be launching my online nutrition and body image training for yoga teachers, yoga practitioners, and other fitness professionals. But I'll talk more about that in a future live video. For now, I just really want to start generating awareness about this issue. I want to help people, yogis, yoga teachers, fitness professionals to understand this and to know what we can do to make our classes and our community safer for everyone, because there's heaps we can do. I'll be back for my next live at 12 noon next Monday. So the same time every Monday for the next few weeks I'll be doing this. It's getting less scary, which is great. Until then, if you're wanting to sink into this work more, I have a free ebook that you can access called A Modern Yogi's BS-Free Guide to Wellbeing. And you can check that out, see how this work resonates with you. You might be going, yes, 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 this is me, or yes, yes, this is my students, this is my clients. I need to know this stuff. And it really is important and can make a big difference to your and your clients' lives. I'll put the link for that free ebook in the caption above this video. I also have a podcast called The Non-Diet Yogi where we talk about this stuff and interview lots of cool people. I have heaps of articles on my website, including blogs and a free email series, that one I mentioned through the live today, about some of the diets I mentioned, which I'll also link. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them below in the comments box. Like or love if you liked or loved. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. I'll be back next week for another live. Bye for now, everyone.